Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Matt Jarbo. Welcome back to another episode of Podio Commentary, where I like to do long-form deep dives into movies, give my thoughts and opinions. Not really a review, so to speak, but just kind of an overview and my thoughts on movies. And what you guys have to remember is I love movies. This isn't a podcast about movies that I grew up watching or movies that I just want to talk about because they're popular. These are movies that I want to watch, movies I want to enjoy, I want to experience, and I hope that we can find some common ground to enjoy these together, right? Even though The Fall Guy is the first big movie of the summer, so to speak, and it also is kind of the first big disappointment of the summer, it is a movie that I just sat down to watch the other day, and I am bummed that I missed watching in theaters because this movie is a flat-out love letter to Hollywood. Similarly, like Tropic Thunder is kind of the same, even though it's a bit more cynical and definitely more like satiristic. The Fall Guy is a movie where it really is about stunt work, stunt coordinators, what those people go through, what they bring to the industry, and how, this story kind of goes over the top in so many ways. Because I'm just going to kind of get ahead of myself here. There's a line in the movie where they talk about how Hollywood wants it to be too realistic these days. And yet every set piece in the movie that's meant to take place in the quote unquote real world is entirely over the top and is entirely something you would see in a movie like the one they're making. So it's really kind of self-referential, and there's a lot of jokes here and there that are very much aimed at the industry. And it's because of that I had a huge smile on my face as I was watching this movie. I thought the whole thing was fantastic. Maybe a little long in the tooth, right? Because it comes in at 2 hours and like 7 minutes, and it's a little long in the final act. But other than that, it's a real crowd pleaser. It's a real great movie, and it's really good to see David Leitch, the director, actually kind of like make a movie like this, because it shows that we do need to give a lot more love and adoration to admiration to the stunt community in Hollywood. They don't have an Oscar for stunt work, even though stunt work is as much of an art form as anything else. And that's actually something that's even brought up in the movie, kind of lampooned a little bit, made fun of a little bit. And you got to love it. You got to love it. So let's talk a little bit about this movie. This was a new release, came out May 3rd, 2024 worldwide. It had an early premiere at South by Southwest on March 12th, 2024. And it got rave reviews. And I don't know why the movie didn't do as well as it could. I mean, this is one that I like. It opened with like a lackluster 38 million, I think. And it's Universal, and the way Universal operates, as I mentioned this on the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare review, is that they kind of use this use theaters as a bit of a marketing gimmick for these movies, because they know that they'll be able to make a lot of money, a lot more money, without giving a split on home video. And I have a feeling that that's basically what happens here, is that he ends up getting, like, this movie got kind of put out there in hopes of making money. Yeah, but at the end of the day, it just ended up getting itself in a position where it's just going to lead Universal's digital sales, and everything else is going to be a write down. But I don't want to be too negative. This is Hollywood these days. We all know how it is. But this movie is actually based on a TV show. And I didn't know that going into it. I was surprised I didn't know about that going in, but it's true. The TV show originally, The Fall Guy, was around from November 1981 to May 1986. So really only 6 months. And I find it weird when they do a film adaptation of a show that didn't live on very long. It didn't have a lot behind it, because it just seems like, okay, now are you just pumping the IP for the name or whatever? Because in the original, it was an action adventure television series that starred Lee Majors and Heather Thomas, both of whom have cameo appearances at the end of the movie. And these were Hollywood stunt performers who moonlit as bounty hunters. And that's actually a really kind of cool concept. And it is, to an extent, what this movie is. Like, if they were going to do a sequel to this movie, you could kind of see the idea there, right? So the original show starred Lee Majors as Colt Seavers, and Colt Seavers is Ryan Gosling in this movie, and then Jodie Banks was like the female stunt woman in the show back from the original, but Emily Blunt plays Jodie Moreno. And then from there, you've got Aaron Taylor Johnson as Tom Ryder, Hannah Waddingham as Gail Meyer, Teresa Palmer as Iggy Starr, Stephanie Hsu as Alma Milan, Winston Duke as Dan Trucker, and then Ben Knight as Dresser's bodyguard. The reason why I'm reading out their names like that is look at the names: Colt Seavers, Tom Ryder, Gail Meyer. These feel like Hollywood television show names, right? It's very much this name that's like, so over the top that it doesn't seem natural. And that again is basically what the movie is conveying all the way through. And so they started working on this. This would be, the movie idea for this film started kind of kicking itself around back in July 2010. So a long time ago. There was a report from the LA Times that said that the movie was coming along and was in development at DreamWorks. And it was going to be potentially directed by Martin Campbell, GoldenEye, Casino Royale, Green Lantern from 2011. No, look, Martin Campbell is an excellent director, and I feel like that movie just kind of got away from him. However, he's still one of the goats of the goats of the goats. And then after a while, it kind of fell apart, even though in 3 years later, when it kind of resurfaced, there were talks for Dwayne Johnson to star in the main role, with Mick G in talks to direct. And I'm just like, yeah, okay. I should do a full deep dive episode just on Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's career to really break down why he's not a movie star. He's an entertainer. He's an actor, absolutely. But he is so much of a brand in need of another brand to leapfrog off of, that there's so many failed projects with him attached to it. Like, for example, did you know that there were talks for a while of him starring in the remake of Big Trouble in Little China? I don't want to see Hollywood burn, but you touch that fucking movie, man, and you know what? I'm finger on the button for me. But that being said, we fast forward 7 years. We get to September 2020, and then we find out Ryan Gosling has signed on to work with David Leitch and writer Drew Pearce, who is known for writing like Iron Man 3 and Hobbs and Shaw, and he wrote the story for Mission Impossible: Rogue Nation. So he's definitely been around. He's not like a nobody writer, but he's definitely like I don't want to say like as prolific as other writers, but he did direct and write Hotel Artemis. That was the one that came out back in 2018. That's like a weird kind of, I don't know how you call it. It's a crime thriller about like an assassination hotel. It felt a little bit too John Wicky at the time, so maybe not the best idea. But he's been around for a bit, and so good for him. So they came on board in 2020 to work on what was at that time an unnamed Stuntman film. And if you know anything about David Leitch's history, you know why this is really important. He got his start working as a stunt double for Brad Pitt and Jean-Claude Van Damme. Him and his stunt crew won awards for the Bourne Ultimatum at the Screen Actors Guild Awards. And, he's definitely been in and around a ton of these action movies for years. Him and Chad Stahelski are the ones who brought John Wick to the big screen. Other movies that he's directed: Atomic Blonde, Deadpool 2, Fast and Furious Presents Hobbs and Shaw. Last year, he released Bullet Train, which I think is probably his best movie. I thought that was really fantastic. Oh, no, that wasn't last year. That was 2 years ago, 2022, my mistake. So he's a good action director, even though I feel like he is very much, color wasn't in his palette. If you go and you look at like Atomic Blonde, you look at Deadpool 2, you look at Hobbs and Shaw, they're very kind of grayscale. They're very kind of colorless. They have this weird kind of vibe to them that I feel Atomic Blonde makes sense because that's set at the end of like the Cold War, and so I get all of that. But Deadpool 2 just kind of felt very kind of muted on a color palette scale. And then you get Bullet Train, and Bullet Train had this wonderful color palette, and all the way through it was beautiful. And a lot of that had to do with the neon of Tokyo. But he was able to really kind of recapture a lot of that here, albeit not as beautiful as Bullet Train. I thought Fall Guy had a lot of color, Definitely in some of the stunt stuff, they wanted to play out like the color explosions with the smoke and everything. And I felt that really kind of added to what he was attempting to do. And then never mind the bar sequence with all the neon lights and the UV bar and everything, and how that whole thing played out. It was definitely a little bit dark, but the neon absolutely like elevated the color. And then the fact that Ryan Gosling's character, Colt Seavers, was high as hell, and it felt like a video game sequence where he's just beating the crap out of all of these bad guys. And the way that it's done is he's high. And so it's just, we're seeing it through his perspective. And it was really unique, albeit a little tonally different for I think the movie in and of itself. But anyway, that scene is wonderful in my opinion. The point I'm trying to get through here is that David Leitch is very much an action director. And having spent so much time in that world as a stuntman, he's been able to bring it over and become a pretty good storyteller. And I have to say, this is one of his better roles. In fact, what's really interesting is that when Emily Blunt came on in 2022, when she was working with Ryan Gosling to figure out their dynamic, because their dynamic is wonderful in the movie. You know, Jodie and Colt, they have this really good chemistry. You know, Emily Blunt has really good chemistry with like everybody, even Dwayne Johnson and Tom Cruise. You know, she's really good. She's fantastic at that. But here it felt more natural. It felt more like there was a lot of like, you know, this love-hate thing going on because people were hurt and they didn't know how to express it, and they felt, you know, damaged and injured. And there was vulnerability there at times, you know, with slapstick comedy. And I feel like they really did a great job with this. But it turns out that they actually took inspiration from David Leitch and his wife, Kelly McCormick. She's actually his producing partner. So, you know, and they're not brother or sister like the Muschiettis, just as an FYI. Some people out there think that Andy and Barbara Muschietti are married. They're brother or sister. This isn't like a Brazzers situation, okay? They're just really good together on their own. But that being said, they, you know, this is how they based their relationship. And I thought that was really kind of interesting because that's sweet. You know, we don't get a lot. That's the thing with the Fall Guy that I really like is I watched it with my girlfriend and we were both really enjoying the love story. Because it's a sweet love story. It's just, you know, there's not like infidelity. It's just embarrassment. It's just like, you know, maybe imposter syndrome. And that kind of, you know, disconnect can really lead to this divide between these two characters who are so insanely in love with each other, but are just like at this place where they just can't get there until the end of the movie. And it's like this whole thing of like, damn it, if someone would just say something, you know, we could skip over all this melodrama. But it's not even melodrama. I don't even want to get too far ahead of myself there. Anyway, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here. Now, Emily Blunt's role apparently was originally only going to be a makeup artist, right? He was a stuntman. She was a makeup artist. But in this case, they wanted to change it to a first-time director. And I think that's a really great way of showcasing the talent of the character. And what I mean by that is like you're showing a woman in Hollywood starting off as a camera op because that's how they meet in the movie. And then 18 months later, she gets chosen to direct this massive feature film called Metal Storm, which is basically just a gigantic riff on not only Denny, whatever, you guys know, Dune, right? And then also what kind of maybe feels like a little bit like a jab at the Zack Snyder Justice League situation. Although I don't want to say jab. I think jab is a bit maybe too pessimistic of a term. What I want to say is it is very complimentary, right? It might be poking fun at it, but it is not doing it in any kind of way that I feel is harmful or bitter or cynical or nihilistic, if that makes any sense. But it's funny to me that they just did that. And I appreciate that they did that because it shows that in Hollywood, you can go from being a camera op to being a director of a huge movie in the span of a year and a half. And the movies, you know, sometimes do well, but sometimes they don't. For example, anyone here remember the 2007 movie Aragon, right? The dragon film? That was a big adaptation for 20th Century Fox. And you know what they did? They ended up bringing on a first-time director who was a VFX artist and, you know, and gave him that movie and it bombed. They just didn't put the right producers in place. Look at Cruel Intentions, 1999's Cruel Intentions, now 25 years old. Man, I'm old. That movie, I forget the name of the director, and I will do a full Podio on that one, but he, you know, he was a first-time writer-director, and Universal brought in all the best people to guide him over the finish line. And it turned out to be a good movie. So it's that whole thing of like, this is how Hollywood operates. But anyway, I'm getting way too off track here. So the movie took place filming in Sydney, Australia, which is funny because the movie itself is set into Sydney, Australia. And that's actually one of the gags is like Colt is in LA and then they're shooting the movie in Australia. So he gets flown to Australia and then the whole movie, he's got like jet lag. And a lot of movies are filmed in Australia. A lot of movies are filmed overseas. They're not filmed in America because since America is the predominant movie-going audience around the world, they want us to see movies that are shot outside of the country. So it doesn't seem like we're just rehashing the same places. Now, don't get me wrong, LA and New York, Frisco, whatever, Miami, Atlanta, those are all key places that we see quite often. But you know what I mean? Where it's like otherwise, you know, they do it so there's a variety for people who are, you know, moviegoers here in the States. And the movie, let's see, wrapped up filming in, I believed January 2023. Oh, no. It was, they started in October 2022 and it doesn't tell me when the last day of filming was, but it looks like it took a couple months, obviously. And because October 2022 would have been the start of summertime in Sydney, Australia, because of the hemispheres change in January, or it would have been like spring and then going into summertime for Australia. So that would make a lot of sense for the weather. And then it had about $150 to $160 million budget, which makes a lot of sense when you watch it. The movie used a lot of practical stunts with highly choreographed action sequences. Again, David Leitch says here that this was a love letter to stunts. We knew we had to be authentic in that world. In fact, it broke the Guinness World Record for most cannon rolls in a car with 8.5 rolls performed by stunt driver Logan Holiday. Cannon rolls are performed by firing cannon-like devices into the ground from a moving vehicle. That's how they cause those flips. And even in the movie, they talk about the rolls and that they did 8 rolls in the movie. And they were like, you know, gushing about hitting that particular milestone. I guess this is one of those little things, again, quite meta when you start to think about it, because they have literally broke a Guinness World Record. And that's pretty awesome, actually. I think that's pretty great. The movie did do pretty well with critics when it came out. It got an A- in Cinema Score. It got a Rotten Tomatoes score of 81%. Those are actually 2 really good metrics. Again, you can take with them like a grain of salt with that. But what I don't understand is why audiences just didn't show up. That's what I don't understand about this. The movie is fun. It is vibrant. It's got Ryan Gosling coming off of Barbie from last year. Emily Blunt is always lovable, always affable. I don't know what went wrong with this movie. Now, granted, I can make the argument myself. I waited to see it until it came on home video. I work 40 to 50 hours a week at my job. So I work on Thursdays to Sundays. So I don't have time to go see the movie when they first come out. And usually during the early weeks, I have kids. So, you know, I end up having to watch these things at night. So I have to kind of wait until movies come home, or movie theaters got to start moving to a 24-hour cycle. If they went to a 24-hour cycle, I could easily go see a movie when I get off work. But it's not accommodating to me, and that's understandable. I get all that. But that's just my own little nitpick. So let's talk about the movie itself. So the movie, like I said, it's a fun little movie that it kind of dabbles in what would be a television show. Now that I think about it, right? There's an opening monologue from Colt Seavers talking about being the stunt double to Tom Ryder, the number 1 action star in the world, how he's seeing Jody, the camera op, how they have this really great, you know, very intense fling, and they get along real well, and they just really like each other. And he thinks he's on cloud 9. He thinks he's at the top of his game. He's meeting the woman of his dreams. He's going to be able to go and just do everything. Then he does a stunt where he falls like 4 stories, breaks his back, and then just loses his confidence. And ends up, you know, 18 months later, he's gone through physical therapy. He's now a valet driver at a Mexican restaurant. And he just kind of hates his life until he gets a phone call from Gail Meyer about how Tom went missing. And he has to come out there and find him. And also Jody had asked for him. And that's like to get him out there, whatever. Then the whole time Jody doesn't want him there because she's mad. But then but then she's also happy to see him. And she puts him through the ringer, but she doesn't ever tell him to go away. And then so he's doing the stunt work, connecting, bonding with her. And then he has to then go at night and try to find out where Tom went. And that kind of leads him down this path of craziness where there's like dead bodies. There are drug dealers. He gets, doped up with some kind of drug where he ends up seeing a unicorn. And that's like, he's like, how will I know when this wears off? He's like, you'll stop seeing the unicorn. It was like crazy over the top stuff. Like the film set, the job, the movie they were making, this movie that absolutely ripped off Mad Max and Dune and everything else, felt like it was more real than the real world around the characters. And I really appreciated that because it just felt like the movie set was grounded, even though that's where all the spectacular stuff in real life, our world, our reality happens. And as he's navigating all of this, he's trying to put it all together, but he's really just trying to get through everything and get Jodie back. And everything just kind of keeps getting in the way because the story of Tom just keeps expanding and expanding and expanding until he finds out that Tom was actually not hiding, killed the stuntman that they had hired to replace him. And then Tom even was the one who rigged the stunt so that Colt would hurt himself 18 months earlier. So now everything kind of comes full circle again. And so then they've got to, work together to stop Tom, to get him to confess, to save the movie, to save their relationship. And, Colt becomes full-on action hero entirely. And it's really great because he just gets beat to hell the entire movie. And he knows he's going to get beat to hell the entire movie. And he's just doing it anyway, always giving the thumbs up. Like that's how stunt guys do it. And it's a really fun little movie. Winston Duke is great. There's this like stunt fight scene where they're beating the crap out of all these bodyguards and they're using like the wire fighting techniques, like the wires to grab them and like basically hoist them away so they can kind of, Spider-Man them up in the air for the authorities to get to them and everything. And there's a whole final fight, final scene where they have to jump over this ravine and they make the jump and then they wreck the vehicle and then there's a helicopter escape. And it's so crazy and so over the top that you really can't help but love what they set out to do. You really can't help but love that. It's got great, character work from Ryan Gosling, Emily Blunt. Their chemistry is awesome. Hannah Waddingham is great as Gail because she's a producer, right? And she's like, there's a line in the movie when we first meet her and he's like, oh, who's that woman freebasing Diet Coke? That's Gail, the producer. And she's always like, the studio's up my ass, and I got to get this thing right. But really, she's just trying to cover up this crime that her client has committed. And she's going to pin it on Ryan Gosling as the fall guy. He wants to get revenge over having lost out on being Tom's stunt double, and it's like, okay, that's kind of great. I kind of, you could see that happening, and then at the end of the movie, they're together, they finish everything else. And Jason Momoa then comes on in now and he gets brought in. They reshoot the movie with Jason Momoa and it becomes a big hit. They go to Hall H. There's Comic-Con references. You guys got to understand, for those of you who don't know me personally, I've attended Comic-Con 19 times. I've been to Hall H the very first year it opened. I was there in 2010 when they brought out the Avengers for the very first time on stage together. Interestingly enough, that same year, dude got stabbed in the eye only like 2 hours earlier over a seating dispute because he wanted to watch the Avengers. Like that's how wild it was. And so Comic-Con is a big part of my life. Movies and the industry has always been a big part of my life. And when I think about Fall Guy and I think about everything that they did with this, it really is, like I said, it's a love letter to the industry. And it just makes me remember why I love it the way that I do. And one of the funniest Easter eggs in the film is David Leitch owns a company called 87 North Productions. And they produce like Violent Night. They produce a bunch of other films recently, but they also have a cameo in the movie when Ryan Gosling is going to fall out of the helicopter at the end and the stunt team, brings out the gigantic inflatable mat for him to fall into. And there, you see the 87 North production logo right there. Right. So like they definitely made sure to product place their own company in the movie. And I think that's really funny. Also, just the fact that that gigantic inflatable mattress was chasing the helicopter around. It was just like so wild how they did that. The movie is great. It's really good. It's really fun. It's still in theaters right now. If you can, I would recommend going and seeing it. It's a fun time at the movies. It is wildly ridiculous. Everything about the movie is ridiculous in what is perceived as the real world, and that is exactly the point. And I feel like that is something that might kind of get lost on some people, but with, any luck, it will find its home on home video. Unfortunately, it only had a worldwide gross of 160 million. So, I was wrong. Its budget is about 150, anywhere from 125 to 150, but it only did 160. So like I said, Universal will write off the theatrical losses, and they'll probably make that up on the home video sales. But if you haven't seen it, go watch it. And if you have seen it, I absolutely want to know your thoughts, your opinions on this one. It's a fun movie. My name is Matt Jarbo. Thank you for listening to Podio Commentary. If you haven't already, please give us a subscribe on YouTube at $3 Theater, or on anywhere you get your podcasts. You can go and find that and give a review over on maybe Spotify does that. I know Apple does. And thank you guys very much. If you have any movies you want to recommend, follow me on Twitter at mjarbo. And yeah, I'm down to watch more movies and talk about them because that's what I love to do. Have yourself a great one, everybody. I'll see you guys later. Thank you again, and peace out.